Toronto currently debating how to regulate Airbnb. Vancouver has already made its moves. New regulations for short-term rentals. For a look at the city's methods and whether Toronto should follow suit, we're joined from Vancouver by Steve Saretsky. He's realtor at Sutton West Coast Realty and the founder of the blog Van City Condo Guide. Good to see you again, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so our viewers, perhaps who haven't followed the Vancouver situation that carefully, perhaps you can explain to us what exactly Vancouver City Council did this week in terms of regulating Airbnb. They have made it legal, but there is a framework.
Yeah, so basically, it's if you have an investment property, you're not allowed to rent it out on Airbnb. Basically, you have to get a business license, which I think is about $49, and you're not allowed to rent your investment property, obviously, and then your basement suite as well as your coach house. So unless it's your primary residence, Airbnbs are essentially banned in city of Vancouver.
So this definitely has a flavor of at least what Toronto has been mulling over, the fact that they are willing to go as far to say, you got a primary residence, you want to rent out a room occasionally, maybe rent out the whole thing because you're going away for a few weeks, we are all right with that. But if you start buying properties just with the intention of turning them into micro hotels, that's where we put the brakes on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously with the market continuing to increase, particularly in the condo market, right? Like, I think there's been more and more investors that are looking for, Airbnb-friendly buildings that can rent these out, like basically full time on Airbnb. And so, I think in Vancouver there's something they estimate about 6,000 illegal Airbnb suites. So, when you have a vacancy rate of 0.5%. It certainly isn't helping to this really housing crisis that we're facing right now.
Obviously, you know the condo market very well in that city. The city is hopeful that this will start to free up some long-term rental supply and help alleviate the crisis there in the rental space. Are they being overly optimistic, or will this make a difference?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think, obviously 6,000 is a pretty substantial number. I think that, people are always going to find loopholes and ways to sort of get around this. I think it could be interesting. And in terms of how difficult this is to police, is Airbnb going to cooperate with the city and that sort of thing? But I think certainly it is a step in the right direction with this. And then, obviously we have a whole bunch of supply coming on. So I think there should be some relief for people that are looking to rent homes for sure.
Could it go as far as, if it does free up some rental capacity, could it go as far as some investor demand waning in the condo space? They say, well, if I can't turn this into a micro hotel anymore, this investment property, that's not my primary property, then why do I even want to bother?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there's definitely some investors out there that are specifically looking to buy for the purpose of renting out on Airbnb. And I think, like, if you look at, a lot of these investment properties today, like the condo market, single family, whatever it is a lot of the numbers don't make sense. You are carrying for the most part a negative cash flow. I mean, it's very hard to find anything that's gonna yield a positive cash flow unless you put 25-30% down. So, if you're looking to rent out to person on say a 1-year lease, it's substantially less money coming in than renting it out, full time on Airbnb.
Steve, I would hazard to say that even though people are very passionate about real estate across the country, no more so than in Vancouver. And when I saw City Council take the actions that it did, a lot of people, as you said, loopholes, started screaming right away on social media that people are just going to find a way around this. Some suggestion that you just make a simple cash transaction with a relative and suddenly your investment condo is their investment, is their principal residence, and you rent it out that way. Is it really that easy to get around these rules?
I don't know. I think that's up for the regulators to sort of poke through. I mean, that's a tough one. Like I said, I think there's always going to be loopholes. I mean, how do you quantify if it's your primary residence? I mean, like, are they going to be checking tax records and that sort of thing? So, like, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's going to be some loopholes. I think people are going to push and test those boundaries, but I think ultimately it should still free up, some of those 6,000 units that were being rented out on Airbnb.
Now, from Airbnb's point of view, I've seen them quoted in some stories following the issue in Vancouver saying they don't think it's fair that it's limited to a primary residence. Do they have any grounds, do you think, to make that argument that people should be allowed to, at least on a limited basis, rent out their investment properties?
I mean, like, honestly, I've heard so many different stories and so many different sides of this. People want to argue that, hey, it's my real estate. I be able to do whatever I want with it. But I mean, where do we draw the line? You're essentially running a commercial business, so it's like, again, I mean, it's a tough one. I don't think you can please everyone. Again, in the midst of a housing crisis where prices are escalating and the rental vacancy is 0.5%, governments have to make difficult decisions, and I think that ultimately, it's the right one.
Now, Steve, someone shared with me a story here about the condominium market in Vancouver, your bread and butter. They call it flipping fever in the condo space. Are you seeing anything that dramatic? Flipping fever?
I mean, I think the flipping numbers, just in the middle of actually working on those and trying to calculate the recent numbers, but the activity has definitely switched over from the detached market in terms of speculative flips into the condo market. I think the last time I looked at the numbers was around 5 or 6%. So it's definitely a number that's substantial. It's much higher than the detached because prices are still increasing almost on a monthly basis in that market. So all the speculation has really turned to the condo market.
We heard from Montreal's mayor this week saying that she at least wants the power to bring in a foreign buyer tax if she feels the need, and will go to the province to ask for that power. She pointed to Vancouver and Toronto, saying that she talked to their mayors and wished they had done it earlier. From what you can see about how the market reacted to the foreign buyer tax and how it has clearly moved on, at least in the condo space, does it really do all that much in the end?
Yeah, it's funny. I think someone the other day called it whack-a-mole, where basically we're just every city is just going to start implementing one of these. I think it's sort of the verdict is still out there. I think that ultimately the foreign buyers tax is probably more effective than not having one. With that being said, I don't think it really gets to a lot of the root issue, which is ultimately, I think a lot of people that are investing here is they do have their Canadian citizenship. So although I think the foreign buyers tax, it ultimately targets someone's passport as opposed to, hey, where are you making your income, and are you paying taxes here? And I think that's really the more effective solution than just looking at someone's passport and taxing them. So I think that's why, after we got over that sort of psychological effect on the market, I think for the most part the market has digested it.
All right, always fascinating stuff. Thanks, Steve.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Steve Saretsky, realtor at Sutton West Coast Realty and the founder of the blog Van City Condo Guide.